Bros, welcome to my morning routine. Welcome to my backyard again. I know I brought you here a couple weeks ago. I just want to continue our conversation here. We're going to the barn. We're learning that sonship is about going to the barn and asking God clearly, what is it that we want? And one of the things that my whole life I have eagerly wanted was to be able to hear the voice of God for myself. What I'm here to tell you is that this is for you. I don't care what you know, what you think. There are more than one voices at work here, right? There's God's voice, but then there's all these other voices that we have to sort through. God's voice is accessible to you right here, right now. But you have to understand that there's other voices that say, yeah, you haven't done enough, you're not practiced enough, you're too busy, you need to get your stuff together, God's a little upset with you, God's gonna make you work for it because he really values, your hard work. I mean, blah, 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 blah. What I am learning is that the voice of God is accessible here and now. He is so, so eager to speak to you. But we have this way of boxing him in. And that's just one of the things that I want to begin disentangling here, right here in my backyard, right? So you've been back here before, but I want to go a little bit deeper into the story that God is inviting me into through my backyard. So every morning, you saw my routine. I come and I throw water up in these trees right here, and I water my garden. I've got vegetables. I've got flowers that are growing. I got tomatoes down here, aloe vera. We've got a couple of these hummingbird feeders. Here's a finch feeder. The finches haven't really showed up yet. There's another hummingbird feeder over there. You can see I got a couple of other bird feeders and a bird bath, and then just a variety of plants back here. So what I have come to understand since last year is that I am setting the stage for a play that God puts on every single morning using all this living stuff that normally I just walk right past and I don't even see. I don't hear the birds singing. I don't see them competing. I don't see the mother birds and the father birds going and getting seeds and cracking them open and then flying over to feed their babies. I don't see normally the hummingbirds, these tiny little birds whose wings are obviously moving so fast that you can't see them, drinking the nectar, but then they're so territorial. They're bullies, and it's fascinating to see this tiny little thing be a bully. It reminds me of the tiny little bullies in middle school. There's two bird feeders. There's plenty for the hummingbirds to drink from, but one of them that's only like a quarter of an inch bigger than the other hummingbird will come and be a bully and say, no, you can't use either of these. And to sit and watch that play out, and the other birds coming and drinking, and then they'll fly over to this tree, which I've learned to water the tree. It's not like I'm watering the roots of the tree. I'm just putting water up in the leaves because the birds prefer over the dirty bird bath to come up here in these leaves, and they'll open up their wings and they'll take a bath by being able to rub up against them like a sponge. It's so, so fun to watch all of this play out. And so last year, I just discovered something that existed for a long, long time without me knowing about it. I've lived in this house since 2004. It's 2020 now, 16 years. And it wasn't until last year that I realized that the sun is blocked until about 10 o'clock in the morning. So even in the hottest part of the summer, I can very comfortably come back here and sit in the shade and spend some time with the Lord and watch the world waking up, a completely different narrative than the one that I typically wake up with, which is worry. How do I get what I need? How do I do what must be done so that by the time the sun sets, I've checked off these boxes? And to be invited into a different story, which is God providing all of this, and for the birds singing joyfully. Yeah, there's competition. Yeah, it's predatory, but that's another piece of the story that you get to sit here and meditate on. So last year, I took a big leap. and left the steady paycheck that I've enjoyed most of my life because I felt like God was saying, this is the time for you to go into full-time ministry. So obviously that brings up a whole new set of potential anxieties and questions for God. And God used this environment to begin speaking to me as I watched him not only provide for these birds through my bird feeders, but for him to ask me the question, am I taking care of all these birds? I'm like, well, yeah, clearly they're just so happy. They're so joyful. And then he asked me, and who am I using to do that? And I'm like, well, to a degree, you're using me to feed these birds. And are you reluctant about that? I'm like, no, actually, it's my joy. I felt like it was my idea, but it was actually your idea. He's like, exactly. Exactly. I want you to know that because you're my son, I am committed to feeding you. But you have to see it. And I invite you to partner with me in that. You will be well fed if you trust me to feed you. Oh, what that did for my heart. But first, God spoke to me by simply following my desire to have an environment in my backyard that fed my soul, right? I was led by desire. And then God spoke to me through just the natural order of things. I'm even laughing right now because I just stepped in dog poo because my daughter hasn't picked up dog poo, which I tend to do as I'm moving around throughout the backyard. So anyway, sidetracked, dog poo between my toes right now. To see that that actually what I'm seeing played out here is good for my heart, but then I can go into the scripture and say, God, what do you have to say about the birds of the air and the flowers of the field? And then to hear the promise from scripture, because all of this was birthed out of God's wisdom, which was the very first of his creations. I'm like, God is inviting me to partner with his word and to partner with the story and nature. And then I get to do something else, which I'm getting better at, and that is sitting in this chair as I watch this narrative roll out, to sit in this chair with whatever resources the Lord leads me to, with a cup of coffee. I also like to light a little flame. To sit here and begin to ask God questions, to practice sonship. My fear has always been that God will not, that somehow I can't hear God's voice. But he's already speaking here. He's already speaking here. But what I really crave is to hear it here and here, and to be able to trust it, and to know that I'm being led to hear his voice when it's easy and when it's hard. And he's using that. He's using all of this to do it. All right, so third part of hearing the voice of God is that still soft voice inside. That's what we all most want. So about 3 weeks ago, I began asking God, picturing myself going to the barn and saying, okay, God, what do I need to learn today? What do you need to teach me? What's my provision today? And I got a picture several weeks ago of him always presenting some type of a container. It would just show up and he would say, in this container is my provision for you. And so some days it would be different containers. But on this particular day, about 2 weeks ago, the container that he showed me, that he was presenting to me, was like that Home Depot bucket over there. Inside that Home Depot bucket is a scoop, and it's filled with birdseed that I went to the Home Depot to buy. Now, after last year's conversation with him about the birds of the air, what he was telling me was, you're my son, and that is my promise to you, that as my son, I'm going to take care of you. Because I have the same concerns that so many of us do right now, like, what's going to happen? How am I going to provide for my family long term? None of us know the answer to that. Right? And all of that speculation is actually harmful to the soul. The only thing that we need to have confidence in, that we're invited to have confidence in, is the love and the provision of God. He has a plan for us, and that was just his way of showing me, I've got this, right? And now every day when I wake up, I have a picture in my relationship as a son with my father of that bucket of birdseed, which ties into the larger story of everything on the planet. Okay, you can see how this begins to all work together. Sonship has no limits on his ability to speak to you. And actually, it's most enhanced when you're open to him speaking through all these different mediums, and they all begin to work together because the way that God's going to speak to you and your story with him will be unlike anybody else's. It's so helpful just to take your comparisons, whatever that picture is of what you want, throw it on the ground, throw some lighting fluids on it, and just burn it, right? And then just say, hey, God, I want you to teach me from scratch how to hear your voice, how to walk with you. And you will find that the story that he's going to write with you, that he wants to co-author with you, is so much better than any story that you could ever write on your own. So with that being said, I want to invite you to learn from a Jedi master who is beginning to release little videos just like the ones I'm releasing to you right here. Her name is Casey Harris, and her passion and her ministry are teaching people to hear God's voice. And she is beginning to release right now 49 of these little videos on how to hear the voice of God. I want you to go. I want you to sign up. I'm going to put the link down below. Just put in your name and your email address, and you'll start receiving these things in the morning. And like this morning's was like a 6-minute video, beginner level, and she's going to get gradually more and more complex. Guys, this is where we're going. And this is actually going to be foundational to where I want to go with the Garage Father. This is foundational to being a son. So I'm teaching these things, but I want you to hear from her and to be able to grow with her. So their ministry at One is phenomenal. Wherever you are in the world, New Zealand, Australia, Great Britain, all over the United States of America, Russia. I know that there are people who are watching these videos and listening to our podcast. I want you to go sign up. I want you to learn from One. So that's going to help us move forward together, accepting this invitation to be a son. Hey, I love you guys. There is so much more for us. You can hear the voice of God for yourself and have that relationship. So this is Jay Heck, the Garage Father, from Being Sons, inviting you to practice sonship and be a son. We'll see you next time.